Canva presents your work horoscope for this week. Deadlines are in retrograde, which we all know can bring some intense energy. Our advice: fend off this forecast with Canva. Like Canva whiteboards to counter creative blocks, and Canva docs for clarity in communications. If you have any sales deals coming through, results will be in your favor with Canva presentations, manifesting many wins for you. It's a great week to love your work at canva.com.
Contained herein are the heresies of Radolf Buntwine, erstwhile monk turned traveling medical investigator. Join me as I study the secrets of the divine plagues and uncover the blasphemous truth that ours is not a loving God, and we are not its favored children. The heresies of Radolf Buntwine, wherever podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome back to Extended Play, where we get to chat for a couple of weeks about the games that have come out once we've all had a chance to play them. This week we're going to be talking about Catherine, which has just come out in Europe. If you're one of our American listeners, then you'll probably have been playing it for a while now. But nonetheless, obviously if you're worried about spoilers, then I'd suggest you don't listen until you finish the game, because we are going to be talking a little bit about the endings, and we're going to be talking a lot about what happens over the course of the game as well. As always, send your feedback to extendedplay@ign.com, and we'll read it all out next week. So, how much of... Oh, sorry, I should really introduce who's here. With me is Tom Butler.
Hello.
Dan Kilby.
Hello.
Making a special guest appearance. And friend of IGN, Stace Harmon.
Hello, hello.
So, how much have we all played of Catherine?
I'm up to the 5th level now, so I've just defeated the bride boss.
Oh,
You don't defeat the bride, you just run away from her.
Right, okay.
There's no defeating.
Okay.
Dan?
I'm 6th level, 3rd floor. Or is it
that's hard,
6th floor, 3rd level? Yeah, it's been the hardest one yet. It's the first one I've had to consult a guide.
Is this the ones that's just puzzles rather than chases?
It's the one where you have to start pulling them out towards you a bit more and edging round and that kind of thing.
And Stace?
And I've completed it on normal.
On normal?
Wow.
Yeah, I am bloody-minded and stubborn, and I sat there for 20 hours and finished it on normal.
20 hours?
Took a long time, but yeah, it's well worth it.
I finished it twice in one day.
Yes, all right.
I did easy, though. I completed it on easy, and it took me 10 hours. And I was off sick earlier in the week, and I just decided to blast through it again on normal just after I finished it, so... That's the second time. But it's much easier on normal, by the way, once you go back.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it much different? I mean, what changes between the two?
Basically just the options, like the number of ways to get up, essentially, I'd say.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah,
there's more blocks.
Yeah, I think the the early levels on normal, when you play them through the first time, I think I was getting like silver medals. I didn't get a single gold medal on my first playthrough, but then you go back, having learned all the tricks and all the techniques, and straight away it's much easier. Gold medal, first level. So it's, I think it's just as Kez was saying, the kind of the method that you have to use to get up the tower, and it's not just putting one block out, it's maybe putting 3 blocks out to get just one step up kind of thing.
And it's also thinking ahead a lot as well, isn't it? Because like towards the end on normal, the puzzles starts getting to the point where you have to think not just about how to get to the next bit, but how to get 4 or 5 levels up. So you end up constructing towers and pushing stuff out and running away from collapsing ones. It gets. I love the puzzle elements actually. I started off hating them, like properly hating them because I couldn't do it.
So what were you enjoying? More of the story?
I was obsessed with the story, yeah. Completely obsessed with the story. Like, I really wanted to see how Vincent was going to wriggle his way out of another day, essentially. But I was kind of tolerating the block puzzles. But then as time went on, it's kind of Stockholm Syndrome, really. Because I got so kind of... got punished so often by the block puzzles, I got really into them.
I think that's a point to make, really, for anybody that hasn't started to play it through yet, if they are listening to this, that normal isn't normal. If you've been playing games for any length of time and you think I'll play it on normal just because that's what I always pick, normal is not normal difficulty. Easy is normal difficulty. They should have just relabeled that, and it should have been normal, hard and nightmare or something like that. But yeah, it's so there's no shame in putting it on easy for sure. It will save you some sanity, definitely.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it's got 8 endings. You can always play it again on normal.
Yeah.
Have you been playing on normal, Tom?
I started off on normal and then gave up after the first puzzle or 2, I think, and put it back to easy. But only because I then found out that most people were playing it on easy, and so the shame was taken away.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's the shame. Like, most people as you say, most people I've seen on Twitter and stuff have been playing it, having to play it on easy first time through. Have you been playing on easy, Dan?
Oh yeah, I wasn't going to touch normal. Not the first time around anyway.
I wasn't prepared for how hard it was going to be at all. So what's Catherine actually about for us? Because it's very easy when you haven't played it to see it as like a moral tale, right? You're choosing between sexy Catherine and wants to marry you and have babies Catherine. It seems like kind of a moral thing about what the right thing to do is. But is that a fair assessment of the game, Tom?
God, I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what it's about myself, to be honest. I'd say that the most interesting thing for me is actually being interested in what's happening in the story. Most games I play through, a story is sort of secondary to everything else for me.
Skip.
Skip. So for me, it's all about following the story and making those decisions. Like there's bits where you're sending text messages and you're literally like, oh God, agonising on whether it's the right thing to do, and that's just ridiculous. A text messaging simulator, like what is that all about? But I read Stacey's piece on the site and I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it. So maybe over to Stace.
Yeah, I'm not so convinced that it's about morals really. I mean, there's a lot of things that say that it is. Obviously there's this element of you cheating on your girlfriend and that kind of thing, which there are moral issues there, of course, but the game I don't think necessarily beats you over the head with it. And even there's a meter that the kind of good and evil, freedom and order, whatever you want to call it, meter that changes whenever you make a particular decision about something. That suggests that, again, that it's a moral thing, but I don't actually think really that it is. I think it kind of wants you to think that it is, but I think actually it isn't. I think there's more going on. And also, you can only influence the story so much with the choices that you make. Yeah. The story is going to play out regardless of what you do. It's going to play out in different ways, of course, depending on what you do. But
the basic points of the plot are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the moral element comes from your own interpretation of it, rather than the game saying what you're doing is wrong or what you're doing is right.
Did you ever feel like it was judging you, Dan?
Not personally. I kind of felt a lot of empathy with Vincent.
Vinny.
So much so that you become Vinny.
And I don't know. You kind of. I feel like if anyone should be judging, it should be the player in a way. But just the way I felt towards him, you kind of get it. One thing I did think about the moral part is that everything happens very quickly. He kind of has this argument with his girlfriend and then just goes out, gets drunk and sort of cheats on her. So that would be my only question as to...
It does seem to happen to him rather than him making the decision to do these sorts of things. It's very, very sort of ambiguous. You often feel panicked for him. Like he's fallen into this situation and almost outside of his control.
It's happening around him.
But I think that's kind of... I'm not going to say too much about that, but that's part of why I say it's not necessarily about morals, really, because that's a very pertinent point that you've just raised, and when you get further on in the game, you'll see that there's perhaps some relevance to that.
Yeah, there's a bit near the end that draws that into kind of clearer focus.
Oh, great.
It reminded me a little bit of From Dusk Till Dawn, the film. That it kind of starts off as one thing, and you're playing through it, or you're watching it, whatever, and then it gets to a certain point, and it all goes a bit batshit mental. And it still works. You get to the end, and you think, actually, even though that was not what I was expecting it to be, it really worked. So
you're saying it gets even more mental than
even more mental than corpse brides and bloated babies and even more mental.
I think it's the bum with the tongue that really freaked me out.
We're going to chat about the bosses in a second, but just briefly before we do.
I mean, just skipping back to that point about judging you. I think the one point that you kind of feel like you are being judged is when you get that decision to make with the two pieces of string, for want of a better word. But
the ropes of morality.
There we go. We can tell who's the writer here. But even then, I don't feel too harshly judged. There was a point where I pulled the rope of morality, and what was said to me was very harsh. I was like, well, hang on a sec. But
what's the best question you've had in the confessional?
So far, this one confused me actually. It was, have you had to apologise to an ex-lover
Ooh.
And I wasn't sure whether that was, do you go back, now she is, or he or she is an ex-lover, do you go back and apologise, or did you just apologise during your relationship? So that'd be my question.
I think even that, I think that again, there's that kind of interpretation element of, there was the one I remember, have you ever got so excited that you've had a nosebleed? And I know Kaz explained that. It's very much a Japanese cultural thing about the sexually excited, and that's depicted in anime and stuff.
Yeah, it's basically if you've got a massive knob on, then you get a nose.
Yeah, but that was that was something that I remember once upon a time I was having an argument with a girlfriend a long time ago, and for some reason we were having this argument in the dark, and we turned the light on, and I had a nosebleed while we were having an argument.
Wow.
Which was just really, really, I didn't feel it, but there was blood all down my t-shirt and everything. And so I kind of thought back to that and thought, well, that excitement in terms of what? I mean, I wasn't sexually excited, but I was really kind of het up. So I said yes for that one. But it's, again, for me, it's that kind of interpretation thing.
Yeah, I had a, do you honestly consider yourself a pervert? Yes/no. I was like, wow, I wish I wasn't playing this next to my partner.
Yeah.
Also, the horrible, there was a horrible one, which was, what do you do if your lover falls in love with someone else? Do you let them go, or do you try and get them to stay? And I thought, that is...
Kill the bastards.
Yeah, where's that rope? But yeah, that there were a few difficult ones. Have you had any good ones, Tom?
No, they've all been sort of fairly obvious ones to start off with, and I know it starts off quite gentle.
It's random every time, you know. When
is that right?
Go through again, you get completely different ones.
Oh yeah, there seem to be sort of fairly generic questions about babies and commitment and things like that, and
quite obvious.
Yeah, quite obvious.
Does life begin or end?
But it has
marriage?
caused a few arguments. Sat next to playing it with my girlfriend, like she really enjoys watching the game being played. For all the different elements, like the puzzle, from the story, from the questions, and all that sort of stuff. It's so rich and layered, and so many different ways to enjoy it that she does enjoy it. And she has got a little bit, why did you answer it exactly like that? And I'm like, I didn't really have much of a choice. It was one or the other.
It's often not a yes or no question what they ask.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird how they phrase them.
But it's that, again, it's that kind of promoting discussion. It doesn't really have that much bearing, I don't think, those particular questions on what's going on, but it's very much it just prompts that kind of discussion. As you say, if you're sitting there playing it next to somebody else, it's that's going to have a much more impact than if you're sitting there playing it on your own, because you just go, oh, yes, no, whatever.
Well, they're kind of deliberately ambiguous, like they let you interpret it. So if you've got a guilty conscience, then you answer them a certain way, and if you don't, then you answer them a different way. So that's the cool thing about it, really. It kind of leaves you to pick up the pieces. But I mean, apart from being about morality, my thing with Catherine is that I think it's about being a useless young adult who can't make decisions, which is something I can really relate to.
Yeah, same.
Like,
you know, the whole kind of that stage of life where things just seem to be happening to you, and you know, you can't really seem to get anything together, and you don't want to get married and have children, and you're not sure whether you ever will, and whether anything about your life will ever change, and whether all of that's fine or not, and you spend a lot of time in bars. This kind of whole sort of stage, I really felt Vincent was quite relatable in that way.
Where you're at that stage where you're not quite young enough to just be completely carefree, but you still kind of feel like you should be, but realising that you need to start doing something about whatever it is, you know, that's coming up, in this case, marriage and kids. So, yeah, I completely agree with that.
A mid-youth crisis.
That's right, yeah. It's a quarter life crisis thing, isn't it?
Figuring out what it is you're going to do with your life. It's quite a good place for a video game to go, I think, because I think it's the right sort of age for sort of the general gamer now. And I think it's really good that someone's doing something like this, even if it is in the most crazy way you could possibly imagine. But I think that's the way you need to approach things like this, because if it was a game about whether or not you're going to stay with your girlfriend and whether you're not, that sounds boring as hell.
It is
But
comparatively.
throw in sheep and giant arse monsters there. You've got me.
They fire love at you.
Arse monsters. The bosses are messed up.
It's terrifying as well. It's actually the first boss I've played in a long time, which actually has put me on the edge of my seat, and it really gets my pulse going, and I will be swearing like mad at the screen. They've done the bosses really well, I think.
The baby boss.
Oh, the baby boss was horrible. And I think the most clever thing about the bosses, I'm not a fan of bosses in games, first off. My biggest complaint about them is that you spend all this time with the game learning about what you need to do to progress, and then suddenly a boss comes and you have to kind of unlearn that and just do what this boss is dictating you to do in order to defeat it. But with Catherine, they've actually woven beating the boss into the sort of like core gameplay, so all it is essentially a variation of what you've been doing anyway. Yeah, which I think is really, really clever.
It's good, isn't it?
It is, yeah. I think the bosses, I mean, most of them are quite heavy-handed in the baby element or the bride thing that you're running away from. But
Yeah, it's not exactly subtle.
No, it isn't. It's not subtle at all. But then there's that kind of the undercurrent of these are Vincent's nightmares, but they're Vincent's nightmares because of this situation that he's in, that he can't make decisions and he's kind of paralysed by this indecision. But they are representations of certainly the bride one, of somebody in his life that he loves, and yet when you get to the end of that, you give that bride a big fuck you and say, yeah, I've just got to the end of this puzzle and I'm so pleased that I have, and and then you open the door and she gets blasted with this light and killed, and you go, yeah, and then you think, actually, that was a representation of my girlfriend. What does that mean? Go figure. But
yeah, that's a point, actually. What do we think of the Catherines?
Oh, the one that you're supposed to be committing to is such a whiny.
She's annoying.
She is annoying, isn't she? And the other one obviously is quite foxy, but then there seems to be something not quite right there as well.
She's a bit unhinged.
Yeah,
she's
absolute psychopath.
Yeah.
You're not seeing anybody else, are you?
Oh my god, don't rip my balls off.
So yeah, he's in between a rock and a hard place, to be honest. I don't know. The game doesn't seem to want you to want either, I don't think, or is that just my interpretation of it?
I don't know. I mean, I agree with you on both of those assessments.
Yeah.
But I don't know if the game's forcing you in one direction or the other. Basically, the game's forcing you to do the right thing, and then it feels like that anyway. And then you start really thinking about it, and there's something that happens just very close to where you are now, which kind of turns the tables a bit and makes you think that maybe Catherine with a K is not what she says she is, and maybe she's messing around, or maybe and that kind of changes it, because then you start thinking, is this relationship worth it? Like, do I actually like her?
Yeah.
Like, quite apart from doing the right thing because of the situation, quite apart from doing the right thing, do I actually like her?
I mean, I think it's actually quite depressing if in real life those were your two options between them, because neither of them.
You'd go for the girl in the bar, right?
Yeah, you would do, but you wouldn't necessarily have a long-lasting relationship with her, because she's absolutely mental.
There is, I don't know if you guys have seen this yet, but there is a bit when you're in bed with Catherine with a C, and you have this thing where you wake up. You seem to wake up every morning with her, despite the fact you can't remember what happened the night before. And in that really cute butter wouldn't melt kind of voice, she says, would you rather I killed you, or would you rather I died? What the fuck? What kind of question is that? There's no right answer to that question. I'd rather you left my apartment, please. But, I think you're right. Definitely, you're not necessarily. They both have flaws.
It's the whole honey trap thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
like this concept of there just being this like really, really seductive person. It doesn't really. It's interesting, of course, because there's 3 men in the room, and I'm a lady. Obviously, some of you might not know that, but
we're not going to ask you to prove it.
Just take our word for it, right? But yeah, I often wonder whether there's any difference, because playing it as a lady, whether there's any difference between how I think about it, because I don't feel remotely judgmental. I relate to Vincent more than either of the women in that game, very much.
Is it a game that could have had play as a female option, do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I feel like Vincent. I think the thing is, it's not the classic situation usually with women is not, I'm 3-timing, what do I do? Or 2-timing, what do I do? But I mean, there's certainly the questions of commitment and of settling and all this stuff. It's just as kind of, it's relevant for women in the same way as it is for men, I think. Especially for women who play video games, which are usually women of a certain age. So, my age-ish. So women in their 20s. Who don't necessarily want the whole kind of house in suburbia, kids and marriage thing. And that's kind of a new generation of women, really. Like, is it a uniquely modern game? Is it a game about people who are, this generation of 32-year-olds?
I think possibly. I don't know, aside from the kind of mechanics of it, and obviously the actual nuts and bolts of making the game maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I think it would have... The Daily Mail would have gone nuts with it if they had. Maybe they have with this one, I don't know. But it would have been this kind of game that was set up as this is a home-breaking game, and how dare you suggest that you can go out and pick somebody up in a bar, and it's teaching kids to be irresponsible and blah. Because I think it's like 15+ rated. So
it is, yeah.
I think it is a fairly modern game. I'm not sure that it could have been made 10, 15 years ago. I don't think it would have worked the same way.
I think if it was a woman at the centre of it, If Vincent was a woman, then he'd be choosing between lovely, dependable, but incredibly boring long-term boyfriend and extremely sexy Ryan Gosling in bar-esque new guy on the scene. I think that would be the quandary there. That's the more...
And obviously, but they'd have to take the baby situation out of the
You'd have to take the whole pregnancy thing out,
because that could get
that
very
wouldn't
weird,
really work.
yeah.
But I mean, yeah, the choice there would still be between the boring life or the life of chaos, and that's really the thing at the centre of Catherine is: do you want to fit in with society? Do you secretly like everything being kind of there for you and being part of the crowd, or do you genuinely want to commit to chaos, which is essentially what you're committing to if you go with Catherine with a C, because there's no predictability there. And she might kill you.
But isn't it almost leading as well? Because Vincent's life, he's a bit of a sad sack. Like, he doesn't really have much money. He doesn't really have anything for him. So isn't it sort of forcing you to make that commitment almost? Because there's not really much of a future for him outside of the woman that he chooses. Like,
there's also a young adulthood thing as well. And what I'm rooting for Vincent to do is not choose between the Catherines. It's for him to take control of his own life and start fucking doing something and, you know, take control of his career and sort of grow up, really. Just within himself, not even...
I think because he mentions a few times, doesn't he, that he's changed jobs, he's got a new job. And there isn't a lot of stuff in there about his job, about what... you get the sense that he works in IT and, software development, whatever it is. But he you don't see him at his workplace or anything. He takes a few phone calls, I think, from his boss. But so I think I kind of got the impression that he is doing something. He's changed jobs, which suggests he's made some sort of decision. Maybe that was forced on him. Who knows? Maybe he got sacked because he's a bit useless. But it looks like he's trying to move somewhere in his life, in certain areas of his life, maybe, but just not able to. But he then kind of uses that as a bit of an excuse to not move forward in other areas. He says, I've just moved jobs, I've got no money, I can't marry her, I can't get married like this, But
yeah, you're right. I think his relationship paralysis is just like one symptom of his general like useless directionlessness in general, but he's sympathetically directionless.
I think he is. I think he's, even if it's just because of the comical faces that he pulls when he when he's in strange situations.
I love his faces.
Bulging eyes and stuff.
So the people, his friends around him and the people around him, I mean, particularly the three guys that he's drinking with, begins drinking with at beginning of every night. Do you think that's part of his personality? Like, are there elements of a personality that he should be trying to pull in? Because they're all quite different. And they've all got quite strong character traits, some of which he's missing, like the experience from one guy, kind of sort of like the careless nature of the other. Do you think, if you combine those four, you'd get the transition into being a young adult to a full adult? Or
very possibly, but then I guess the friendships that you have in real life, I think you can reflect that, I think, because you can be drawn to people that kind of have qualities that you don't necessarily have. Not all of your friends are going to be carbon copies of you. So I think definitely they are set up so they've got these different aspects of personality that Vincent is lacking, and he has something that they don't have as well. He's a bit more hopeful than one of them, but a bit more cynical than another, etc. So yeah, I think if you put all those four guys together, perhaps they'd be a sterling bloke. But I think it does also, it kind of reflects certain friendships in real life as well. I think
it kind of highlights Vincent's deficiencies in a kind of quite subtle way, that because you've got the brilliant naivety of young Toby, who's just like, I'm totally gonna not be a virgin soon. And then you've got Orlando, who's like, my wife was awful to me, and so on. And then you've got Jonathan, who just is very mysterious and becomes less mysterious towards the end. But yeah, I think they're a pretty typical group of young men, really, aren't they, in general?
Yeah, they're like the take that of Japanese video games.
Tom and Dan I think Tom and Dan are going to step out of the room now because Stacey and I are going to have a chat about endings. As always, please send your feedback to extendedplay@ign.com, and we'll be chatting about what you think of the game next week. If you haven't finished the game and you don't want any chat about endings, switch off now and come back when you have. So what ending did you get, Stace?
I got the True Freedom ending, which was basically, it meant that I didn't end up with either Catherine.
How did you get that?
Well,
where was your bar?
I got that by basically being fairly two-faced, really, because I was fairly encouraging to the slutty Catherine,
for want of a better
the Catherine with a C, and kind of I was quite happy for her to send me these text message pictures and stuff. But then when Catherine with a K was texting me, I was quite caring. I was a bit really quite selfish and just really, really kind of just looking out for what I wanted. So I ended up actually with neither of them, and ended up going on a tourist trip into space, which was interesting.
Oh,
as you do,
yeah,
not as part of the game, but
he's
got
he's
got a poster on his wall that $80,000 or $800,000 or something to get a trip into space. And there's a little bit, kind of a voiceover at the end where Vincent says something along the lines of blah 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 blah, and in the end, you have to live your life to do whatever makes you happy, or something along those lines.
How twee.
Yeah, a little bit. So, yeah, I didn't end up with either of them. What about you?
I got the worst imaginable ending. I got what's called the bad cheater ending.
Right.
Like bad, as in not the good cheater ending.
Yeah. But
the bad cheater ending. I basically throughout the whole game, I was very, very nice to Catherine with a K, and fairly dismissive to Catherine with a C. Right. But then when I was doing the confessionals, I was going with my own feelings, which were quite different to the role that I was casting Vincent in. So in the confessionals, a lot of my decisions were based on what I want, which at the moment is not stability at all.
Yeah.
And also my experiences, which are varied and not like Vincent's. Whereas the way that I was behaving in text messages and stuff and decisions I was making for Vincent were different. So I ended up right in the middle of the morality spectrum, okay? So I ended up just very, very, very slightly towards the cheater end of the spectrum. And here's what happens for me. At the end, Vincent broke up with Catherine with a K. But then, and also he finds out, obviously, that Catherine with a C isn't real. But then he bullies Boss into making Catherine with a C into a real human and bringing her into this dimension. And then he asks Catherine with a C to marry him. And then she says no.
Where did that come from?
Then she says no. And then Vincent gets run over by a bus.
Right.
So that was my ending.
That's a pretty bad day.
It was really, really bad ending. And I was very... This is partly why I just went straight through it again. I was like, I'm not satisfied with that ending. I'm going to do it again.
Have you got any idea how much at the end, you go through these freedom questions rather than you're still in the confessional.
Oh yeah.
But you have the freedom questions rather than the kind of the other standard confessional questions. Have you got an idea how much of an impact they have on the ending? Because you get asked a lot of questions, and I don't believe they can all. Because I was pretty much where you were on the scale, which is a bit because I was pretty much slap bang in the middle.
I think I read about this, and apparently the 5 questions, each one of those changes the ending. So whatever you answer to each one of those changes the ending that you'll get.
Right.
So you can answer 4 yes and 1 no, 3 yes and 2 no, so on and so on. It changes it every time. Yeah. But what you go into it with, like the scale that you go into it with, also modifies it.
Yeah.
So I think if you go in, I think you can only get 3 or 4 of the endings if you just answer those 5 questions differently with the same morality at the beginning.
Right.
It's interesting though, isn't it?
It is very interesting. Yeah, and I will go. Well, I'll definitely go through it again and see if I get a different ending. And I'll probably be deliberately. I kind of feel like the first playthrough for me was the true playthrough.
Same,
it was a little bit like.
I got a sucky ending.
Yeah,
you got the best ending.
I don't know. I was quite.
That sounds like the best ending to me.
I think given the circumstances, given the fact they both the Catherines are quite flawed, as is Vincent, that it's probably best if they all just call it a day and go their separate ways. And yeah, I think I'd like to go through it again and see kind of how that differs. But I would be making choices that I probably, just to get a different ending, I'll be making them deliberately. It's a bit like, for me, I think it's a bit like Heavy Rain, that your first playthrough is the kind of your true playthrough, and then you go through it just to try and see different stuff. But
totally, yeah. Like I was to be honest, I was slightly tempted to YouTube the endings, and then I thought, I haven't done it, and I probably go through it another 2 or 3 times. Not the whole game, but I'll go through the ending another 2 or 3 times. Then I probably will YouTube the rest, just because I'm not going to play the entire game again just to look at an ending.
Yeah,
that is artificial anyway.
But I think you also, I don't know how much difference it makes, but it supposedly the decisions that you've made and where your meter is during the game, I think is supposed to impact on the kind of little internal monologue things that Vincent does when you get when you're in a particular situation, because your meter comes up at that point, and it kind of shows where it is, and then I think depending on where you are there, he is then thinking different stuff, which doesn't necessarily change the ending, but it does change the experience slightly. Depends how interested you are in the narrative, but, you know, it's...
That's weird as well. Like, second time through, I started replying, you know, those picture messages that Catherine sent you? I started replying with just, like, nice. Like, more pics, please. And that totally didn't go well, because I was trying to get Bad Boy morality rating, basically. But every time you're nice to Catherine with a C, it puts your blue rating up. If you're nice to Catherine with a C.
So you have to be just
the problem before is I was being mean to Catherine with a C and mean to Catherine with a K. And that apparently will give you the bad boy endings. Right. But if you encourage one of them and are mean to the other, then
I was encouraging both of them.
Because
I'm a slut.
Evidently,
I want stability and freedom. There you go. Brilliant.
The eternal quantity.
What a top man.
Well, that's about it for extended play on Catherine. Please tell us your thoughts on this game, because obviously it's a brilliantly thought-provoking game, and also a lot of people don't like it, so I'd be interested to hear from any of you if you think it's a bit shallow, or if you really hated the characters, which is something else I've heard. Email us at extendedplay@ign.com, and we'll be discussing what you think next week. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
You should listen to the GamesIndustry.biz microcast.
More people are playing games than ever before. They've never been more popular, and yet the business behind it is facing some real challenges and changes.
There's been tens of thousands of layoffs, hundreds of studio closures as major companies face rising costs and falling sales.
There's uncertainty around the future of game consoles.
There's legal and government intervention into how games are even being paid for.
The role of AI is changing how games are being made.
There's the impact of games like Fortnite and Roblox dominating everyone's time.
And then there's the desperate wait for Switch 2 and GTA 6, and that's just 2024.
Two leading business journalists with a combined 35 years of experience offer you a weekly guide through all of this and more.
I'm Christopher Dring, head of GamesIndustry.biz.
I'm James Batchelor, editor-in-chief of GamesIndustry.biz, and you can join us every Monday for the GamesIndustry.biz microcast.
The most important stories,
expert guests,
exclusive market data,
and all in less than 30 minutes.
Usually.
The GamesIndustry.biz microcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Listening to a podcast should be time well spent, and I promise it will be if you'll give this podcast a try. It's called Something You Should Know. I'm the host, Mike Carruthers, and in every episode I talk with leading experts on topics I know you will find fascinating. From why people can't keep secrets, what your favorite music says about you, why your pet acts in strange ways, and so much more. Something You Should Know is designed to give you information you can use in your life and give you great intel that you can share with others. I'm told it's a binge-worthy podcast, and with over 1,000 episodes, there's a lot to binge on. Something You Should Know has been ranked in the top of the Apple Podcast charts consistently for a long time. I know you're going to like this. I just need to get you to try it. Something You Should Know. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts.